Article 5 of the United States Constitution gives we the people the power to put the federal government back in its constitutional box and expand liberty for all. Once 2/3 of the states pass similar applications, a convention of states will be called and there is nothing the federal government can do to stop it. This isn't a red movement or a blue movement. It's an American movement based on one fundamental question: who decides? Who should decide the issues that affect your community? Washington, D.C., or you? The Convention of States Action Resolution applies for an Article 5 convention that would propose constitutional reforms limited to 3 topics. First, fiscal restraints on the federal government. With over $140 trillion in unfunded liabilities, we need a balanced budget. But our resolution also allows for caps on federal spending and taxation. The second topic is limiting the power and jurisdiction of the federal government. The Supreme Court has authorized the feds to have control over almost every aspect of our lives. The COS Action Resolution empowers us to restore the Constitution to its original intent and return power to the states and the people. Finally, term limits. Thanks to a corrupt ruling class in Washington, trust in the federal government is at an all-time low. That's why our resolution gives Convention of States commissioners the power to send the career politicians packing, including the judiciary and other federal officials. State legislators will know that you really are their constituents in their district. Call, email, or request a meeting with your state legislators to ask them to co-sponsor the COS resolution in their state. Get plugged in with your local Convention of States team so you can stay engaged, educate others, and respond to national calls to action. Our success depends on you, so we're inviting you to be part of history. Let's invoke the constitutional solution that's as big as the problem.
Absolutely. So, folks, if you're interested, go to conventionofstates.com. Even if you don't have a lot of time, what I would suggest you do is click on the Take Action tab and sign up to become a volunteer activist. That will get you connected to your state team, and they'll be able to let you know when we need you to do those kinds of things, whether it's call your legislator, email your legislator, show up at the Capitol. Small things, like Mike is saying, that don't happen every day, but happen 1, 2, maybe 3 times at key times where we really need people to show up, and you can help us make the difference. But if you're interested in becoming a district captain, you can do the same thing by going to conventionofstates.com, clicking the Take Action tab, and signing up to become a district captain. The other thing that Mike also pointed out, getting people to sign the petition. The easiest way to do that is just send them to conventionofstates.com, or bring them when you're with your family, pull it up on your phone, pull it up on the laptop. People can sign the petition that way. And as Mike said, it's huge and it makes a major difference. So please help us in doing that.
Their choice is to be the hero or the zero. And they're welcome to be either, and we're welcome to treat them accordingly, correct? So I'm going to close with this. Whatever happens from here is in your hands. What you do is in your hands. There are 3 things you can control. You can control who you trust. For me, that begins with Almighty God. That's where it starts for me. I hope it starts there for you. Number 2, you can control your attitude about what happens. I can promise you one thing: bad things are going to happen to our country, to you, to all of us at some point. And the question is, what do we do when something bad happens? Do we stand? Do we get back up if we're knocked down? Do we continue to fight? That's up to you. Are you going to continue to fight? So we're going to stay in this fight. I don't want to hear anybody tell me that they're quitting. It's too hard. It's depressing. It's frustrating. Because we're not going to stand for that, because we're warriors, right? The last thing we can control is what we do. What we do. And I can tell you what we do as Americans is that we stand up. And no matter how many times we get knocked down, we stand up again. And no matter how many times we get knocked down, we come back to the fight. I can promise you this, for me, personally. I can say this for everybody who got up on this stage today, and I think I can say it for all of you. There is a time that will come when I will quit fighting. And that time is when that first shovel of dirt hits the top of my damn pine box. And until then, I will fight. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.
What's your position on Convention of States?
I think we live in one of these 1776 moments where we need to rediscover what it actually means to be American. It is internal to the Constitution. So a lot of people have a misconception about this. They think it's some sort of work around the Constitution. No. This is within the Constitution for a reason. So I'm going to be very clear about my view on this. I think that the bar is really high for amending the Constitution, for channeling anything through Article 5, as it should be. That means that if that actually is convened, I think it's very unlikely, practically, that anything would come out of that unless there was widespread support. However, it can spawn a national conversation that we're missing in Congress, at state legislatures, etc. It's become so ossified in the boundaries of modern, boring partisan politics that we need to go back and actually be having a discussion about the first principles about what it actually means to be American. And the Constitution, the framers of the Constitution, they had a great forethought for periods just like this one. So I think just getting that convention together, calling it alone, will have a useful function for the country. And I challenge every other GOP candidate in this field to recognize the same thing.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
District captains form the backbone of the Convention of States movement, fulfilling our vision of a citizen network that restores self-governance in America. As a district captain, you will help recruit, welcome, and educate other volunteers in your local area. You may also inform in-district volunteers of when they can have their voices heard at committee hearings at their state capital. COS provides cutting-edge training and connects you with patriots who have been exactly where you are starting. So get on the front lines of the movement to reclaim liberty. Apply today at conventionofstates.com.
By heart. And those two words are power corrupts. What's the rest of it?
Absolute power. Absolutely.
Do we all know that that's true? Is there anyone on the planet that does not believe that? We all know it, we just kind of forgot it. So that, to me, is the two-word summary of Convention of States. We are relearning and re-recognizing that power corrupts. And for more than 100 years, well-meaning people, not God-fearing people, but well-meaning people, have given more and more and more power to Washington, D.C., and what has been the result? Corruption, right? It's not because we're sending bad people there. It's because we gave them too much power, and the founding fathers knew it. So if you don't get anything else out of this rally, that's the two-word summary when you're in an elevator with somebody of why you're working in your very busy lives, taking time to come to Denver, Colorado, to the Capitol on a cold, windy day to work for Convention of States, because we have recognized that we gave too much power to Washington and we've totally corrupted our national government.
I just want to give you a couple of minutes of background on the Article 5 effort and COS in particular, because I've been in the fight from the beginning, pretty much. It was back in 2012, actually, that I heard that Mike Ferris was coming to town to talk to some people about Article 5. And I thought, well, and I'd known Mike for, a couple of decades by that time, and I knew that if he was thinking something was an important issue to be paid attention to, I better too, because he really is a forward-thinking, liberty-loving patriot that has done much for our country in many ways. Anyway, so I went there and listened a little bit and became convinced that this is the time to take action.
I'd like to point out to you the veterans that are here today. They're wearing the cover. I call it the uniform of the day. They've got the cover of the branch that they served in, and they're wearing their COS shirt. So, thank you. They're still serving their country with the dedication they displayed when they were in the military. Many of us were just 18 or 19, 20 years old when we swore an oath to serve and protect the Constitution of the United States from all enemies, foreign and domestic. They did so proudly. They were willing to serve then, and they're willing to serve now. Some did a single tour, some made it a military career. There's an individual here that has done more than 30 years in the Guard, a true citizen soldier. But they are willing to go and serve as part of the military, to participate in the leadership of this country. We are here not just to support the Convention of States movement, but to participate as it required the oath that we took to preserve the Constitution. We all must participate in our democracy. You're doing that today just by being here. You're making a difference.
You have to get the word out. This has to be grassroots. We have to keep pushing this issue and pushing this issue. Federalism is a beautiful thing. We have to constantly remind the federal government that we are not an arm of the federal government. We are the boss of the federal government.
We're the
so just know that I'm in there fighting for you all. I'm in this house fighting for these reasons right here. My district is House District 47. We're a God, family, country district. We love our guns. We love our Bible. We love our freedom. And as long as I'm in this house, I'll stand for those things. But I couldn't do it without people like you, because your prayers, your kind words, and your support, you don't know what that means to the mighty 19 in this building, how it props us up every single day as we fight for the greatest document, well, the second greatest document. I will never overstep the Bible. As we fight for the second greatest document ever written by man, and that's the United States Constitution. There are many people that swore an oath to this Constitution, that put their lives on the line for this Constitution. And until my last breath, I will fight for that Constitution. To all the veterans here today, I see you. Thank you for the sacrifices that you made. I'm going to go back and get to work for you because I know why I'm here. Thank you very much for being here. God bless you all. God bless Colorado. And God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
All of you who continue to work hard for Convention of States, it's a privilege for me to be on this particular resolution, along with Senator Byron Pelton. A lot of the Convention of States folks are out all over Northeast Colorado, my house district, petitioning, getting signatures. You're in places like the sale barn, you're at the county fairgrounds, at different events, and it's really a privilege to know that you're out there working this year after year after year. It is a constitutional right. It has a solution to solve the problems, some of the largest problems that we face. And so every year I stand shoulder to shoulder with all of you, and I will continue every year I'm up here to be either a prime sponsor, prime co-sponsor, or sponsor.
We are on the floor discussing bills and trying to fight really hard to keep what is really just more and more erosion of our Constitution, both at the state and the federal level. This effort is so important to make sure that we strengthen our Constitution that we all hold dear. We have got to work together to make sure that we don't lose this country.
Every single day, the infringing of our rights happens in this building. It is disgusting to walk through these doors and see that not all people are being represented at every single point in time. I wouldn't lose too much hope. I think you guys being out there is what we need. I wish there was more showing and groups coming down and supporting us. We feel truly alone in that building, and when we see people like you come out here to represent what we stand for and our values, we have that shining glimmer of hope to continue the fight on. There's 2 more weeks left, and we are so appreciative of you guys being here, because it actually gives us a shiny bit that what we're doing down here matters. And I hope you understand that. We care for you, we love you very much, we love to see your support. Write your legislators. Whether you have a Democrat or a Republican sitting in the backyard of your district, you need to talk to them. And you need to make sure that your voices are heard at every single point in time. CC every single person in that room and make sure you are counted as a vote in Colorado. It is very important.
I want to give a shout out to Douglas County Convention of State supporters, because John is always here knocking on my door. The first thing that I saw when I was going to run for the legislator was term limits.
I believe in term limits. I think that's how you hold politicians accountable. And I appreciate you guys fighting for the Constitution. We are seeing it being ripped away one bill at a time every day in this state. But I promise you there's 19 of us that will continue to fight and speak truth and uphold our constitutional values. And I appreciate you taking your time and coming down here and praying for us and helping us lead this fight. So thank you for being here.
But I'm so glad we can exercise our First Amendment right. Our right to assemble, our right for free speech, and to petition our government for grievances. Does anybody have a few grievances right now? Yeah, absolutely. But you know, in spite of everything that's happening in our nation right now, we truly live in the most blessed, the most prosperous, and the most exceptional nation in history. Do you agree with me on that? Absolutely. But we do have some grievances, and we're going to talk about that, like inflation. Anybody been hit by inflation this year? Anyone think that the government is overreaching their authority with what they're telling us to do? Anybody think that maybe 40 plus years is a little too long to be in office? Absolutely, yes. It's time to stop leaving the massive debt to our children and our grandchildren. Thomas Jefferson said, "To preserve our independence, we must not let our rulers load us with perpetual debt. We must make our election between economy and liberty or profusion and servitude. I choose economy and liberty myself." We need term limits. Our founding fathers never intended anyone to be a career politician.
Well, we need this to happen. I appreciate you all being here, working for this cause. We got just a brief time here going from the Senate floor to committee. So I just thought I'd stop and say hi, and it was a pleasure to run that measure this year. So thank you.
The most important rule is not the First Amendment. I'm on one of the NRA committees, the Education Committee of the NRA. The Second Amendment is not the most important. They're both really, really important. The most important rule in any organization is who has the power to make the rules. That's it. And there's two provisions in the Constitution about who has the power to make the rules. It's Article 1, Section 1, and Article 5. Those are the provisions about who has the power to make the rules. Article 1 is about making ordinary law, like statutes, and Article 5 is making constitutional law. That's what it's about. And who has the power? Ordinary law. Congress has 100% of the power. The president shouldn't make law. I don't care if he has a phone and a pen. He shouldn't be able to make law. The agencies shouldn't be able to make law. They can make recommendations, but it violates Article 1, Section 1's original meaning if they can make substantive laws that bind private people and private property. If they can make an administrative regulation about the operating hours of the Washington Monument, okay. If they want to have a dress code for the Department of Justice, fine. Administrative rules are fine. I believe that it violates the principle of self-government and Article 1, Section 1 of the Constitution when you are able to have the President and the EPA and all these other people make law. One more quick thing. When the Founding Fathers said that treaties would become part of the highest law of the land, they thought treaties would be restricted to their original function, and that is how nations treat other nations, not how nations govern their own citizens. The founders never believed that treaties could be used to govern the domestic policy of the United States, but that's what's happening. And I could name 20 more abuses, but all the abuses I have given you are sufficient to say this. The federal branches, the administrative branch, the executive branch, and the congressional branch, the legislative branch, have all seized powers they were never given. And the Supreme Court is complicit in all of this because the Supreme Court has said every time, that's okay, go ahead and do it. And what we're facing is that we effectively have two constitutions in this country. We have, and so if you told the federal government they're not following the Constitution, they would say, that's not true. And in their mind, they say it's not true because the Supreme Court has blessed their practices. Now, once in a while, the Supreme Court will slap their hand, but it's the rare occasion. The vast majority of what I've described for you, the Supreme Court said that's just fine. Because there's one rule in Washington, D.C., and that's this. You always increase the power of Washington, D.C. And all three branches of government are in on it. It's not a conspiracy behind scenes or anything. It's just shared values. It's the conspiracy of shared values. It's their political, legal, moral, quasi-religious, a godless worldview, but it's still got some religious overtones to it. And so it's conspiracy of shared values, not this hidden. It's all out in front for us all to see. We don't have to go reading behind any sneaky documents. It's all there. We can all see it. And so if we're going to fix all this, you ultimately have to fix these Supreme Court decisions. And the question is, how do you do that? Normally, there are only two methods of fixing a Supreme Court decision. At least a Supreme Court decision that it refers to the Constitution. And that is, either you get it reversed by a different Supreme Court, or you pass an amendment to the Constitution.
All of us at the Convention of States Project truly believe freedom is worth fighting for. That's why we are executing a strategy that uses the Constitution to restore America. We believe the key to our success is creating and mobilizing a grassroots army at the state level, and the most critical member of this grassroots army is the district captain. We need a district captain in each of the 5,000 state house districts nationwide. As a district captain, you're on the front line in the fight for liberty. You'll be connecting Convention of States supporters in your local area, partnering with your state director to organize local town halls, meetings, and petition drives, and mobilizing local activists to have their voices heard at your state legislature. We will give you all the tools you will need and proudly stand shoulder to shoulder with you as we recruit, train, mobilize, and engage the largest grassroots army in the history of the United States. So be a part of the movement that refuses to let liberty die and stands up for our children and their future. Welcome aboard.
So, Mark, most of us have never heard of Convention of States. That's not an organization that you created. That's something in the Constitution of the United States, specifically in the 5th article of the U.S. Constitution. Explain it to us.
Yeah, so in the 5th article, it describes the ways that we have to amend the Constitution. The first way is when 2/3 of both houses of Congress decide to propose an amendment. It goes out to the states for ratification, 3/4 of the states. There's a second way that we've never used. All our amendments, 27, come from the first way. The second way is when 2/3 of the states decide to get together in convention. They pass resolutions in their state legislature. It takes 34 states, and they can gather in convention and propose amendments, just like Congress can at any time. And then those amendments go out for ratification by the same way. It takes 3/4 of the states to ratify. So that's the process specified in the Constitution.
Okay, that's a lot. That's a lot of information. So, first of all, why would we ever want to amend the Constitution? The Constitution is a great document. It's one of the most precious freedom documents that we have today. Why would we ever want to amend it?
Well, unfortunately, especially over the last 115 years, the courts have essentially amended our Constitution hundreds of times. If you look at what they've done, there are thousands of pages of court cases that came out of the Supreme Court telling us what this beautiful little document means. And there are things in there that really don't make any sense. And the only way that we have to push back against that when the court does things that you or I or the majority of people don't believe in is to call a convention, propose amendments, and tell them, no, we're going to go back to something more like the original Constitution.
So normally, the federal government has to come together and agree to make a change to the Constitution, to outlaw certain things, or whether we're talking about slavery or other kinds of things like the Bill of Rights, making sure that we have that freedom of speech, that freedom of religion. But the Convention of States, it's kind of the last line of defense.
Correct.
If the government turns tyrannical, then they're going to make amendments that serve themselves and might injure the people, right? So talk about what happened that created that Article 5 Convention of States option. How did that come about?
Yeah, I think this is really important. 2 days before the end of convention in 1787, Colonel George Mason stands up. He's from Virginia, and he says, we've made a big mistake. We gave the power to Congress to propose amendments, but we didn't give it to the people acting through the states. And then he asked a question. He said, are we so naive that we believe that a federal government that becomes a tyranny would ever propose amendments to restrain its own tyranny? Now, I think they laughed, actually, because, of course, tyrants don't restrain themselves. That's never happened. We kind of know they did because we have Madison's notes, which say 2 Latin abbreviations, nin com, which means no comment. There's no debate about this. And in fact, then what they do is they unanimously adopt the second provision of Article 5 that allows us in the states to route around a tyrannical federal government and propose amendments to restrain federal tyranny.
So essentially, the people within the states can say, the federal government has turned into a monster, and so we are going to get together as the people. And it takes a lot of us to do this because it's not easy to do. It's kind of the nuclear option. It's the last-ditch effort to restrain evil. And we're going to get together and amend the Constitution specifically for the purpose of what?
Restraining federal tyranny.
Holding back the beast of an out-of-control government. Okay, do you think that we're really there in our country where we need to bring on a convention of states to amend the Constitution to limit the power of the government?
I think we're absolutely there. And I think the results speak for themselves when we look. You know, if you can go all the way back, I'm kind of an old guy, go all the way back to President Reagan. When he was elected, he promised to shrink the federal government, put Bill Bennett in charge of the Department of Education, promised to do away with the Department of Education. Now, I love Ronald Reagan. He's definitely a conservative icon, but the federal government was bigger when he left office. The Department of Education was bigger when Bill Bennett left the Department of Education than when they started. The beast is too big to restrain from within Washington, D.C. It has to be done by the people outside.
Some people might be watching this going, wow, you guys just got all political. Like this is, you know, your faith guys.
Yep.
And if we get focused on politics, we're going to turn people away from Jesus. Are we out of our lane right now by talking about political things and amending the Constitution?
You know, I think we're right in the heart of our lane. Right after I became a Christian, and I came late in life, I was 51, I'm 60 now. I went to Israel, we did a tour of Israel, the Holy Land, and we did it from a political and a faith perspective. And what you realize when you look at what happened when Jesus Christ came to earth, when God sent his only son to be sacrificed on earth, it was a very political time. And you had the entire world around the Sea of Galilee, and Jesus Christ came as the king, right? Not a traditional king, a new kind of kingdom, but it was very political. The Israelites said, oh, you're going to be our king, you're going to restore Israel. Well, not that kind of a king, but he created all sorts of political turmoil, and he actually was, in addition to being our savior, a very political figure at the time. So I think this is right where we belong. God expects us to express our faith in every arena, and I've not been able to find anything in Scripture in 9 years since I became a Christian saying, yeah, you shouldn't express your faith in the arena of politics.
Our faith should be like leaven that leavens through the entire lump of bread, of dough, right? That we don't want to divorce our faith from the way we use money, from the way that we love our children and our friends. We don't want to divorce faith from the public square. It needs to be there for it to have its heavenly influence.
Yeah, and I would like to add, I think Satan wants us to stay out of politics because he's in politics. Right?
Certainly evil men want good men to stay out of politics.
Right.
That's what they're counting on.
Right, so if we don't bring our faith into politics, then what we say is, we'll leave that playing field, which has so much influence in human affairs, we'll leave that to Satan.
So back to Convention of States. In order to call this meeting together of the people of the United States, you need 2/3 of all the states to agree to convene, to hold a convention. And then there's a very specific process laid out in the 5th article of the Constitution that says how many of the people in attendance need to agree to the amendment.
Yeah, that's correct.
And is it a lot? Like, is it easy to pass an amendment through this way?
I think it's very hard to get to convention. That takes 34 states. It takes 38 states or 3/4 of states to actually ratify. It's not easy.
Has this ever been done before? Has a convention of states ever been called in the history of our country?
It has not.
It is not.
It's never been done before, which is one of the reasons I think it's so extraordinary to be doing it right now and to be living in this time when we need to and we have the opportunity to do this.
If the Convention of States happens and it's successful, how will that help the family of faith safeguard our First Amendment rights?
Yeah, I think the most important way is it'll get the federal government out of our business when it comes to the practice of our religion. The states are generally speaking, not all, but generally speaking, much more friendly to faith. People are much more free to exercise their faith in the majority of states. And so it gets the government out of our way, generally speaking, not only in faith, but in all other areas. It also removes strife from the American body politic. And I think this is really important. One of the reasons we're so at each other's throats in America today is because we're different. New York is different than Texas, which is different than California. When we govern everybody from Washington, D.C., we force a one-size-fits-all on everybody. So we have to have those fights. They're important. If they're in all the states, we wouldn't be fighting that way. We're much closer to each other within a state than we are as a nation of states.
I can hear some people saying, but wait a second. If you amend the Constitution, you've just walked in, you've thrown open the door to the holy place. You can't change the heart and soul of America. And you could be opening a Pandora's box, and now all of a sudden, you could destroy the Constitution and unravel things in a way that you didn't intend. What do you say to that?
Well, I would say, one, the founders disagreed with that. So I think that's really important. They put this in there for a purpose. They understood. They were very smart men who understood human history and human nature very well, and they knew this time would come. And number two is you have to understand the process. And this is really important. There's a lot of protections along the way, but the ultimate protection is just simple math. It takes 38 states to ratify anything that comes out of convention. A convention can only suggest. So whatever comes out of convention requires a supermajority, the highest bar in our entire system of governance. And I always ask folks like us, people of faith, well, if you're concerned about this, tell me the proposed amendment and then give me the 38 states that you think would ratify it. And I've been offering that to millions of people over the years, and I've never received a single email telling me what 38 states would ratify something that they don't like. I hear the Second Amendment, for example, all the time. We're going to lose our right to keep and bear arms. Well, today there are 23 states that have what's called constitutional carry without a permit. How do you get to 38 states ratifying something to take away our Second Amendment rights? It just can't be done by the numbers. All the convention calls for that we're working to call is anything that would impose term limits on the federal government. About 85% of people believe in that. Anything that would impose financial restrictions like a balanced budget amendment, again, that's an 85% issue. And then I think the most important thing, anything that would limit or reduce the scope and power of the federal government. So for you and I, that's things like telling them, no, you can't be involved in education. You can't be involved in healthcare. You can't be involved in the environment. These are things where the federal government was never meant to be involved, and we need to shrink it back down and put it in the constitutional box. So we're not really trying to change the Constitution so much as restore the original Constitution.
I think that that's really important, that that you're not trying to change the Constitution. You're trying to rein the government back in to line up with the original intent of the Constitution, which was never to take the responsibility to educate our kids away from us as parents. Tell us how that we're going to run our healthcare. That's something that we do ourselves. And tell us how to run our businesses and our churches. That's something that God's given for us to handle as individuals and as families.
Yeah, that's exactly correct.
Yeah. So how can people get involved in Convention of States?
I think this is really important. We talk about a lot of stuff in politics and in faith. And then the question is, what do we do, actually? Because talking is one thing, and it's good that we talk about it. What you do is people go to Convention of States, they send a petition, they click on the link, send a petition to their state legislatures.
And how do they go there?
Conventionofstates.com, and they click on the link to sign the petition, and then more importantly, click on the Take Action tab. Volunteer to be involved, and our folks are involved in a lot more than this. They're fighting for their faith, their freedom of religion in state legislatures, right to life, right to keep and bear arms. If you get involved, you're going to be involved in a family of people, primarily believers all across this country in all 50 states. Wherever you are, we need you involved. Today, over 5.2 million people are involved. They're at conventionofstates.com.
This is important. This is something that we need to learn more about. Convention of States is already, I believe, halfway there to getting 3/4 of the states in the union to agree to call a convention. This is real. This is happening. Mark, thanks so much for leading the charge on this and for helping to ensure that our freedom to worship God remains unfettered.